Welcome to another episode of Community Chat. My name is Kevin Touch, and I will be your host for this segment. What do we talk about here? Well, the list is long, but just to kind of give you a few things off that list, and that is we talk about issues, things that are coming up in the community, help you get to know folks. And a lot of times we have folks who are, it could be an author, they could be a candidate for office. It so happens that today we have somebody who is returning who is a candidate for office. She is a Republican candidate for the state treasurer's office. We have Elizabeth Dionne who is joining us. Elizabeth, welcome back.
Kevin, such a pleasure to be back here with you. Thank you for having me back here in Abington.
So we're having you back because we're past the Mass GOP convention, which happened at the end of April. You were able to get the necessary votes. Well, I don't think there was anybody actually running against you.
So you're actually making a really important point.
Yeah.
I'm going to step back. I say this and people are shocked. Massachusetts is actually a purple state, but it doesn't look purple for four key reasons. The first is that we are literally the birthplace of gerrymandering. This is the single most gerrymandered state in the nation. Second issue is the Democrats have a very disciplined, well-oiled machine, and Republicans have an unfortunate tendency to shoot each other in a circular firing squad. Third reason is the September primary. That is designed to protect incumbents. So for me, it was critical that I avoid a primary because there was absolutely no way that I could fight a primary and then in 4 short weeks fight a general election. The reason I say 4 short weeks is because of mail-in voting. So you literally have 4 weeks post-September to run a general campaign. It doesn't work. There's no way that you can overcome the money advantage, the name recognition advantage. So I worked very hard. I announced in December, which was a little bit late, but I worked really, really hard to make sure that I wouldn't have an opponent, to convince Republicans that I was their candidate before we ever got to the convention. So some more hurdles. And then I mentioned the fourth is, and we can come back to this, the way that the Democratic Party has used the state, but particularly the treasurer's office to fund its party operatives. But going back to hurdles, and in addition to all of this, the state makes it really hard to get on the ballot. It's probably the hardest state in the nation to get on the statewide ballot, none of which helps democracy. But for me to be on the ballot, I had to get at least 15% of the state delegates at the convention. So you have to gear up, go to the convention. Great experience there, but still, it's a lot of effort. And then finally, for me, for statewide office, I had to get 5,000 signatures certified from registered voters. I'm happy to report that we blew way past the 5,000 mark. Our final number with the Secretary of State was 7,923. We submitted signatures in 252 cities and towns. That's a record for treasurer. There were a number of clerks who said they literally never had treasurer nomination papers come in. But our campaign wanted to send a really clear message that we want to represent all of Massachusetts. It's not just the greater Boston area. It's the gateway cities. It's the north, it's the south, it's the west, it's the rural areas that very often are just completely ignored on Beacon Hill. So this is a campaign for a taxpayer's treasurer that represents literally every corner of Massachusetts. So I am thrilled that I don't have a primary challenger. I'm thrilled that I am officially on the ballot, that people can cast a vote for fiscal responsibility in November. So it's been a journey, but it's great to be here, and I'm really pleased with how things have turned out.
For folks who are just tuning in, and maybe they're just seeing you for the first time, give them just a little bit of your background so they can get to better know you. Tell us a little bit about yourself so they know who you are.
2 important things to know about me. Probably the most important is that my husband and I are the parents of 4 adult children who cannot afford to live and raise their children here in Massachusetts, and neither can their friends or their classmates. We have an affordability crisis here in Massachusetts that is driving our young people out. In particular, our 25 to 45-year-olds are leaving at a record pace. And I felt that if I didn't stand up and try to be part of the solution in 2026, I'm not sure that we can ever regain all the ground we've lost. So the first reason I'm running is an affordability crisis. The second reason is also the affordability crisis. The second really important thing to know about me is that I spent the last 10 years as an elected local official in Belmont, Massachusetts. So 10 years of budgeting experience, first on town meeting, then on the finance committee, then as chair of the community preservation committee, and finally as a select board member and chair. We did everything right in Belmont, and we can go back and talk about some of the reforms that I drove through. We have a AAA bond rating, and I looked ahead and there's really not much more we can do, and there is a financial tsunami that is engulfing our cities and towns here in Massachusetts. That is also part of the affordability crisis, and the reason why is the way that we predominantly fund local government is through property taxes. So we have a record number of cities and towns seeking Proposition 2.5 overrides this year, and it is not because their cities and towns are badly run. It is squarely on the shoulders of the state legislature in Beacon Hill. We are not returning enough money in local aid, and the Treasurer's Office has a key role to play in local aid. Local aid feeds directly, lack of local aid means increased property taxes, and that hits family budgets. So affordability, we need to get more like local aid back to cities and towns. And with my 10 years of local budgeting experience, I am ideally qualified to do that.
For folks who don't know, what would you, if they're not familiar with the State Treasurer's Office, kind of give them what some of the primary responsibilities are for that office?
Let me step back and say, people need to understand, voters need to understand that the Treasurer's Office in Massachusetts is uniquely powerful. It is one of the least known offices and one of the most important. And there's historic reasons why it's so powerful. The primary job of any state treasurer is to manage cash and make sure that the state has enough cash on hand to pay its bills. So cash that is available gets parked in various banks around the state that we can pull in. Banks can use that to loan out to residents or businesses, but the state needs to be able to pull that money back in to pay its bills. The second part of the title is the Receiver General. So the treasurer also handles the state's bond issuances. This matters because a little known fact, again, playing into this affordability issue, we have in Massachusetts over $120 billion of debt that you owe, that I owe, that our children, our neighbors, our friends all owe. So again, every dollar of that debt is going to have to be repaid. That again has a direct impact on family budgets and on affordability. So those are the two things that any treasurer would do. But in Massachusetts, the treasurer has, the reason the role is so important is that every time there was a Republican governor, the legislature would take something that maybe ought to have been with the governor and give it to the treasurer instead. And the reason for doing this was to preserve patronage cronyism. So to make sure that the Democratic Party could throw business to its members. So they could have sometimes a non-show job during the day, and then they could go out and do party business. So you and I, for the last 60 years, have funded Democratic Party operations. 3 ways that we have done this through the Treasurer's Office. When the lottery was adopted, and we should go back and talk about the lottery because it is the single largest source of local aid. It's the 4th largest source of revenue. When the lottery was adopted, Frank Sargent was governor. And no way did the Democrats want that job machine to go to Frank Sargent. So instead they gave it to Bob Crane, who was the most corrupt treasurer in Massachusetts history, became a multimillionaire as treasurer, gave 98% of jobs to Democrats. I don't know how the 2% of Republicans got in. But so the lottery, which is a huge revenue generator, went to the treasurer. When Mitt Romney was governor, the legislature actually took the Alcoholic Beverages Control Commission away from Mitt Romney and gave it to the treasurer. And that matters because there are a lot of taxes that get imposed at the state and local level on alcohol sales. So again, a revenue generator. It also, right now, there's some pay-to-play going on where if you don't make donations or use the right attorneys, your alcohol license won't be approved or renewed. We've been told this by a whistleblower from within the department. And then the third thing that ironically now is back with the governor but wasn't originally, When Charlie Baker was governor, the Cannabis Commission, again, another very large revenue generator, didn't go to Charlie Baker. It went to Deb Goldberg, the incumbent treasurer, where she made such a freaking mess of it that in April, the House of Representatives, every single member of her party voted against her to take it away from her and give it to the governor because, and this is a direct quote, the Speaker of the House called it a train wreck. What she had done in 9 years with that commission was a train wreck. And so it is now back with the governor. But again, I think, and then in the Senate, I think all but one member of her party voted against her. So that's pretty impressive to have all but one member of your entire party on Beacon Hill vote against you. It's really an indictment of her leadership and her oversight. I went astray. You were asking about things that the Treasurer's Office does. So I outlined those three large generators.
Primary responsibilities.
So we hit the primary responsibilities, but there are more. The Treasurer also chairs the Pension Retirement Board. Major problems there. The Treasurer chairs the Pension Reserves Investment Management / Pension Reserves Investment Trust, which invests the state's $120 billion pension fund. We have a problem there. We've got a $33 billion hole in our pensions, which again, add that to the $120 billion in debt that you and I are already responsible for. We're also responsible for $33 billion in pension funding that's not there right now. So you're looking at hundreds of billions of dollars that the Treasurer manages. According to WGBH Radio, it's nearly 20% of the state budget. One person, nobody knows the office, no one's paying attention to the incumbent, who, not making this up, spends a third of her year in her third home in Palm Beach. She's not even a full-time state resident, and she's phoning it in, if she attends at all. So you have someone who's being paid $229,000 a year, which is more than most taxpayers make, and she is not doing a full-time job. It is really distressing.
You touched upon the lottery, which generates billions of dollars. Do you see, if you were elected in November, an opportunity to not only strengthen but modernize the lottery system?
Yes, and yes. A number of problems there. First of all, the incumbent Treasurer Goldberg, we really have to look at her hires. They don't have lottery experience. They're not very talented. She fired some key people who are actually extremely good, who won awards for their public relations for the lottery. So the people who are in place, and I'm not talking the rank and file, I think most rank and file members in the Treasurer's Office are probably, as my experience is, really dedicated public servants. But I am talking about her discretionary leadership hires. They're really problematic, and I've heard this from multiple people. They don't know what they're doing. Revenues are down. We are not competing with sports betting. We're not competing with gaming. We are not competing with prediction markets. So there is a huge pool of opportunity out there, and we're losing ground. And why that matters is as we lose ground, then that money, all lottery revenues are supposed to be dedicated to local aid. The less money the lottery generates, the less money that we have for firefighters, for police officers, for teachers, for roads, for sidewalks, for sewer, for water infrastructure. All the things that people rely on local government to do to make sure that they have an acceptable quality of life, a lot of that depends on the lottery and how it's doing. And under Deb Goldberg, it's not doing well.
I believe that some of the funding from the state lottery also helps with programs such as unclaimed property division, but more so the Massachusetts School Building Authority, which is responsible for helping to build new schools, or even have a program that if there are repairs needed, there is some assistance there too.
Another area of major problems. I have spoken with multiple state legislators. There are a number of Democrats on Beacon Hill who can't wait to vote for me because good governance is not partisan. And I am intensely interested in reform and efficiency, and so are these good public servants. So I really view this as a nonpartisan issue, but I have been told repeatedly that she's done one of two things. She either refuses to look at reform legislation at all, or she'll give it lip service and then kill it behind closed doors. And what I was told, she killed legislation to reform Mass School Building Authority behind closed doors. So these good Democrats can't wait for me to be on Beacon Hill because I want to partner with them to make sure that we're providing the best services to every taxpayer, every citizen, every resident of Massachusetts. I am passionate about reform. I am passionate about helping people. So specifically on the Mass School Building Authority, there's two problems that we know of. One is the MSBA used to have much better controls in place to manage costs. Those are gone now. That is why you end up with a high school in Lexington that's going to cost $660 million, or a proposed high school in Boston that's going to cost $1 billion. It's nice to have fancy schools, but one fancy school, there's a finite pot of money. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent on 2 high schools mean that other children are attending schools with leaky roofs that may still have asbestos, that don't have adequate heating or cooling. You can't say yes to everything. By saying yes to these expensive schools, we're saying no to just basic, decent schools for other children all around the Commonwealth. So it's really inequitable distribution and wasteful. We also know this. There's an organization called Mass Inc. that does a lot of research into public policy in Massachusetts. And last year, they published a report where they'd done a deep analysis of spending from the Mass School Building Authority. And what they found is that disproportionately wealthy suburban districts were being funded by MSBA. And gateway school districts and rural school districts were not receiving their fair share. We absolutely need to look at the distribution formula from MSBA. It's great that districts get schools. My district, Belmont, got a middle school and a high school. But we managed to build both of those for under $300 million not that long ago, just 5 or 6 years. So I don't think there's been that much inflation. There's been inflation for sure, but not so much that we're doubling and tripling the costs of construction. So we really need to take a deep look at that, just to make sure that we can serve the maximum number of school districts and children, and that we're being efficient and fair. I think nobody's going to argue with efficiency or fairness. That is not a partisan issue. That's Democrat, Republican, unenrolled. Everyone can get behind that.
You touched upon it a bit, the Cannabis Control Commission, and I don't know if folks paid attention, but there was some controversy with its chair and some court action taken. Give me your thoughts as to something like that taking place in the Treasurer's office.
Quite shocking. And again, I talked about cronyism and Deb Goldberg putting her minions in place at the lottery. She did the same thing at the Cannabis Control Commission. She had a longtime aide named Sean Collins who was not qualified, but she insisted that he be hired as the executive director, and he just created chaos. When Massachusetts passed recreational marijuana, the state made a lot of promises that we would protect public safety and health, that we would provide opportunities for small businesses, and that this would be a revenue generator for cities, towns, and the state. There has been certainly revenue generation, but because of the chaos at the Cannabis Control Commission, small operators couldn't survive that. So a lot of small businesses have failed. And that's impacted their host communities. That's impacted these good entrepreneurs who put their life savings in. Shannon O'Brien, and let me give you a little background on Shannon O'Brien. So she is a highly reputable public servant. In 1998, she was elected as a Democrat as the state treasurer. So she would be my predecessor in this office. I had a very good reputation for her time there. She was the first woman in Massachusetts history to be elected to statewide office, not as part of a gubernatorial ticket. So we'd had a female lieutenant governor, but that had been under a male governor driving the ticket. So Shannon was the first to be elected on her own. She then in 2002 was the first female candidate for governor. She was the Democratic candidate for governor. Lost to Mitt Romney, but still ran a good campaign. Anyway, Shannon was brought in 2022 to clean up the chaos at the Cannabis Control Commission. She very quickly figured out that Sean Collins was the problem. And I know this from having read the court records. I know this from having read articles about this. I know this from the testimony of her two attorneys who were named Lawyers of the Year by Lawyers Weekly for their work. Oh yeah, when Lawyers Weekly weighs in and praises work. So that tells you there are a lot of eyes on this. So O'Brien went to Goldberg and said, Sean Collins is the problem, he's got to go. Well, what would a good leader do? A good leader would say, oh gee, I know Sean is my friend, but my job is to put the public interest first. That's not what Goldberg did. She said, no, Sean Collins is staying because he's my loyal henchman. You, Shannon O'Brien, the qualified reformer, has to go. And so and I'm an attorney, so I was just following this in the papers at the time, and I was just shocked. Shannon O'Brien had some, commissioners are supposed to operate independently. They can't be fired except for cause. And for cause is a pretty high legal standard. So Goldberg manufactured a reason. She said, racism. I'm going to play the race card. So she accused Shannon O'Brien of racism. And as O'Brien said at the time, Goldberg just destroyed my reputation and my career. I will literally never work again if I've been fired for racism. And I looked at the evidence that Goldberg presented, at least as reported by the Boston Globe, and then when I went through and read the decisions, she had two incredibly flimsy examples, neither of which, according to the judge, rose to the standard of racism. And the judge who ruled on this in September 2025 said, this charge of racism was built on a house of cards. But O'Brien had to spend 2 years and hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million of her own money to fight this. Deb Goldberg had access to your money and mine. She wasted $1 million of taxpayer money to hire outside counsel to pursue this personal animus vendetta against a good public servant whose only sin was to stand up for public safety and the public good. Her only sin was trying to do the right thing. And Goldberg accused her of racism and tried to destroy her. When someone tells us who she is, we should believe her. Deb Goldberg has told us who she is. She is someone who will lie and abuse her power. That is not someone who should be in a position of public trust. And we also know she lies for other reasons. There was an article in March, separate issue, a whistleblower complaint that the Cannabis Control Commission ignored while O'Brien was out. I should note that a judge reinstated O'Brien in September of 25. But while she was out, a whistleblower complaint was completely ignored about a number of violations going on with a cannabis company. And in this article in the Boston Globe, Goldberg claimed, I haven't spoken to Sean Collins in a decade. Well, we know she attended his wedding. We have pictures that she posted on Facebook of traveling with him and her entourage to various places. Unless they had Quaker meeting and didn't speak at any of those events, she outright lied. And she's done it again, and she will do it again. She has lied, and she will continue to lie.
What do you see as the biggest challenges currently facing the Treasurer's Office? And maybe you might need a half an hour to kind of give it. But if you were to kind of give bullet points as to some of the things that you feel you're going to have to, day one, address and take care of in January of 27, what are some of those issues?
There's what's known and what's unknown. We do know that there has been really excess and unjustified spending. And why this matters is every dollar that the treasurer wastes is a dollar that's not available for local aid. So it really does come out of taxpayers' pockets. So an example of this uncontrolled spending, here's another example of who Deb Goldberg is. We had identified tens of millions of dollars of wasteful spending under her leadership, if you want to call it that. One of them that was pretty shocking was $20 million on event space at the lottery. And I thought, how do you run up a bill this big? What happened? And I've actually finally had a couple of state representatives told me what happened, which was that Representative Mark Cusack was giving Goldberg grief over the Cannabis Control Commission. She didn't like that. So this woman engages in personal animus vendettas, political vendettas that you and I pay for. And the lottery at the time was located in Braintree, which was Representative Cusack's district. So she decided, without consulting with the unions, without consulting with others, to move it up to Dorchester. And that cost you and me $20 million.
Wow.
I just was stunned, but I've had multiple Multiple representatives confirm this story. And so that's just one example. Another example is close to $600,000 over the same period of time on luxury travel, luxury meals, these conferences, junkets for want of a better word. That's just not necessary. That is the type of spending that a woman engages in when she's the heir to the Stop and Shop fortune, which she is, never had to work a day in her life. I mean, not saying she hasn't worked, but she's never had to worry about paying a bill. She spends a third of her year in Palm Beach. She is so out of touch with the affordability crisis in the state. She's so out of touch with the constraints of your average family. I'm the fifth of 10 children. I know the value of a dollar. My husband was the youngest son of a single mom on a farm in Idaho, and his two older brothers left. At the age of 14, he was running a farm and going to high school. He had 3 days off all of high school. We know how to work. We know the value of a dollar. Massachusetts has been very good to us, but we earned it. We didn't inherit it from mom and dad. And mom and dad certainly didn't put $5 million into political campaigns as the incumbents' parents did.
So I would ask you, as Massachusetts residents continue to face affordability challenges,
Yes.
as you mentioned at the open, how do you feel that the Treasurer's Office under your leadership can address economic concerns that are facing not only families but retirees?
Oh, another really good question. So among the 12 or 13, depending on how you count them, divisions in the Treasurer's Office, two really important ones. One I already mentioned, PRIT, which is the investment vehicle for the state's pension funds. The other is the retirement board itself, which determines pensions as public servants retire. We know that lately, especially longtime employees from the Department of Corrections or Department of Correction have been denied their full benefits. And I'm not going to get into all the details of this, but they're being denied Group 2 designation, which is, it acknowledges hazardous conditions. And I'm sorry, to be a guard or a supervisor in a prison, that's a hazardous condition. And so these good people, instead of receiving the 80% of their salary that they were promised, are being given 50%.
Wow.
Well, right there, they've worked for decades. I am absolutely committed. So I engaged in a lot of pension reform as a local official in Belmont, but pension reform was never accomplished on the backs of frontline public servants, frontline workers. We make promises, we keep promises. Promises made, promises kept. So the solution is actually with the investment fund, and I'll get to that in a minute. But we should not be balancing the pension gap on the backs of frontline workers here in Massachusetts. That's just wrong. I mean, when you lose almost 50% of what you plan to retire on, that's an affordability crisis for each of these people. Another issue that's feeding into the affordability crisis is the ongoing rise in property taxes. I'll be blunt, in Belmont, we did have an override. I did have to advocate for that override. I only voted for half the amount that the teachers union wanted. But without the override, we were going to have to close the library and one of our only 2 fire stations after already closing another fire station previously. That library is a frontline area that our entire community uses, and fire is just basic public safety. Belmont would not have had to ask for that override if we'd been receiving adequate state aid. But every time taxes go up, property taxes go up, we price retirees on fixed income out. We have got to stop the increase in property taxes. So backing up, the retirement board impacts state retirees. That's a subset of retirees. Property taxes impact every retiree. The answer to this is to increase local aid. Right now, Massachusetts ranks 39th out of 50 for local aid. At the same period of time, over the same period of time that the state budget has doubled, local aid's gone up only 25%. But the mandates keep coming. So you can't fully fund the services that our residents deserve and expect when the state is not doing its share. So the state is keeping all the money and giving us all the responsibility. I love veterans, and I don't mean to disparage anyone who's in the Air Force, but there's an old saw about the Air Force, which is that they would build the bells and whistles first, the clubs and all the pretty shiny toys. And then at the end they'd say, oh, we need more money because there's not money for the runways. That's what the state's doing right now. The state is funding bells and whistles at the state level, and then looking at cities and towns and saying, oops, not enough money for schools or public safety or infrastructure. You're just going to have to go find it somewhere else. So the state is forcing these ongoing increases in property taxes. We are fourth in the nation for property tax burdens. Can you imagine where we'd be without Prop 2.5? We are eighth in the nation for overall tax burden. We have lost ground. We're Taxachusetts. We are Taxachusetts again. And we are witnessing what my campaign calls the mass exodus from Mass as a result. We are pleading with people, you've got one chance to turn this around. It's November of 26. You need common sense, dedicated public servants. And that's what we're trying to offer. We're offering the voters a choice in November of 26.
As you have been traveling around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I think you probably already touched upon some of the things that folks are saying to you, that what their concerns are. What are you hearing from them in regards to maybe some other items that we haven't touched upon?
One of the concerns that I'm hearing about, this comes up because of the lottery, is sports gambling and young men. So again, an area of reform so on the one hand, we have legalized gambling through the lottery. I'm actually glad that the state runs that, because otherwise it would be run by the mob, which used to run it, and would put hits out on people. So, yes, we're running a gambling operation, but because we run it, we can do so responsibly. I would really like to see, and right now it's a very fractured regulatory area. I would really like to see the lottery come together with the Attorney General, come together with the Gaming Commission, and decide what is our unified approach going to be toward addressing problem gambling. And this does matter because people lose their lives to it. Gambling is actually one of addictions. It's the addiction that leads to the most suicides. So it really has an impact on the person, him or herself, their friends, their families. And that was something that I was not surprised by, but that has come up a lot. That there is a role for the treasurer to take a leadership position. At the same time, as I mentioned earlier, I'm really concerned that the lottery has lost ground to online, to sports betting, or to casinos, or to prediction markets. Rather than expand the number of people who are gaming, I'd really like to make sure that we could capture a larger portion of that market, because as a state, we can give better returns to people playing the games, and the profits don't go back to make the state wealthy. They get reinvested in cities and towns. That's one thing that I've heard. Another thing that I've heard, this is a truly bipartisan campaign. I really ran as a reformer in Belmont and acted as a reformer, and sometimes I upset conservatives, because sometimes, well, I wouldn't call them conservatives, but there were some Republicans that I did upset, because there were some areas that I cleaned up that they were benefiting from. I don't care what party you are. I'm going to serve the public good. What I'm hearing from a lot of Democrats is they don't recognize their party anymore. This is not the party of John F. Kennedy. It's not the party of the great Senate President Tom Birmingham. It's not the party of Tom Finneran, who was a very skilled financial manager. They are hungry for common sense government that focuses on the bread and butter issues of public services and financial responsibility. They're desperate for some leadership in this area. And one of them, this was a couple weeks ago, I was up, and so I'm going places that people don't think of Republicans going, whether that was marching in the Dorchester Days Parade over the weekend, which was so much fun, or going to Lawrence, going to Lowell, going to New Bedford, going to these areas where people are hungry for the message that we bring, which is we hear you, we see you. There needs to be more equitable distribution of state resources. There needs to be common sense government that funds the things that you care about, public safety and education. So I think that's what has been one of the biggest surprises, is the number of Democrats who feel abandoned by the state party.
If you are successful in November and become the latest Republican to serve as treasurer, I think last one you and I talking off camera, Joe Malone, I believe was the last one, right? How would you work with the legislature? How would you work with constitutional offices that are overwhelmingly controlled by Democrats?
When all's said and done, people over politics, people over party. I have a 10-year reputation in Belmont for working for solutions. I think that's what most people want. I know it's what legislators in the legislature want. Deb Goldberg is deeply unpopular in her own party because she has used this very powerful office to stymie reforms that are nonpartisan. Nobody's going to argue against increasing lottery revenues to boost local aid. Nobody's going to argue against efficient spending of school construction funds or more equitable funding of school construction funds. These are nonpartisan issues. And again, because I see people as people first, and because I have a track record of working collaboratively with any and everybody in Belmont, people can see that I was a relentless reformer who nonetheless was pleasant and cheerful and wanted to get things done, wanted to be productive, wanted to solve problems. One of the things that I used to say was potholes aren't red or blue, they're just potholes that need to be filled. At the end of the day, we don't look at our police officers as red or blue. We look at them as people who are putting their lives on the line every day to ensure public safety. Same way we look at firefighters. Firefighters aren't red or blue, or emergency medical technicians who are working through emergency medical services. They are providing fundamental public safety. We just want our sewers and our water supplies to work. These are not partisan issues. We happen to have a two-party system, and so you really, realistically do need to be a member of one of those two parties. But if you look at Massachusetts, 7 of our last 10 governors were Republicans. The state did incredibly well with Republicans in important offices on Beacon Hill. And I'd say you could even claim Ed King as a Republican in all but name, since he ran against and defeated Michael Dukakis as a fiscal conservative. So there is a path for Republicans. Not only is there a path, a number of Democrats have told me we need some checks and balances. They actually need some Republicans there to counterbalance the far left of their own party. These are common sense moderates who want the same things that you and I and everybody else want, which is functional government that serves basic needs. And Massachusetts, gosh, do we miss Charlie Baker? 3.5 short years, and we have hemorrhaged jobs. We're 50th in the nation for economic growth. We're 50th in the nation for job creation. Can't blame the national administration for that, which the incumbent is, the Beacon Hill's currently trying to do that because currently Beacon Hill can't run on its record, whether it's the treasurer's office or any other office. All they can run on are divisive social issues and national politics. Those national politics have literally nothing to do with the treasurer's office.
When you watch what's going on with another constitutional officer in Dionne DeZoglio, what's your thoughts in regards to what the ongoing issue of trying to audit the legislature, yet there's all kinds of activity. I think the House recently just passed
a transparency bill.
I
feel like we're living in George Orwell's 1984, where words are the exact opposite, where war is peace. And I think they say education is weakness or ignorance is power. I'm getting it wrong. But I have never been so shocked in my life as by what the House did, bringing a bill with no hearings, less than 24 hours notice, asking the legislators to vote on it without actually having read it or seen it, and then having the unmitigated gall to lie to us and call it a transparency bill. Shocking. Dionne DeZoglio, we're different parties, but boy, do I respect her commitment to transparency and the public good. And I have committed as a local level, so that the legislature likes to impose requirements on local officials that it doesn't apply to itself. So for 10 years, I complied with open meeting law. For 10 years, I complied with public records requests. Those were difficult at times, but they were good. They were good for democracy. They were good for transparency. It meant that there were no backroom deals. It meant that the public always knew what we were doing and why. My commitment as treasurer is the same, that I will abide by the same standards that I've always abided by. And also that my very first act as treasurer will be to order a full audit and performance review of every department in the treasurer's office. There are some that have happened, not enough, and I don't think they've gone nearly as in depth as they need to for us to be able to identify what the problems are that need to be fixed. There are problems we know about. We know about problems at the lottery. Oh, I didn't even get into procurement at the lottery. There's another story, a scandal that might be breaking. But there are problems that we've identified. We need to identify the rest of them before we can fix them, which is why, and this is something that I had thought about anyway, but Joe Malone has written a manuscript of his time in the treasurer's office, and it was actually his first act as well. He got Bain Consulting, and then 3 of the big 6, at the time big 6 accounting firms, to come in and do a pro bono audit. And the things that they found put in place reforms that he implemented over the next 8 years that we are still benefiting from. For instance, the pension investment fund, the changes that he made, hundreds of billions of dollars of benefits there.
Well, I think you're going to allude to something in regards to another potential breaking scandal, if you would.
At the lottery?
At the lottery, finish that thought.
So there are procurement requirements whenever, whether it's a city and town or the state enters into a contract. And what we have been told is for the iLottery, which is the latest iteration of the lottery, online lottery, there's a company called Scientific Games. They are the industry leader when it comes to providing lottery services for states around the nation. They were the first lottery provider here in Massachusetts. They're very good. They're very efficient. What I've been told is that they were not allowed to submit a BAFO, a best and final offer. And sometimes this can be really important because there are times when, first of all, a provider might be just more efficient. They might also be willing to provide something at a slight loss simply to gain market share and then sell that same product to other states. Scientific Games was not allowed to submit a best and final offer. The contract instead went to a former state official who's a Goldberg crony. So she did a favor. We were told she intervened. She stopped the BAFO, she stopped the process, and allowed this other vendor to come in. There needs to be an investigation of what happened there. We think it's comparable to what happened with Apple Green on the Mass Pike. So there needs to be an investigation. We need to get to the bottom of it. And we maybe need to reopen this process to make sure that Massachusetts taxpayers are getting the best deal possible, that we're not just lining the pockets of Deb Goldberg's cronies.
Again, if you are successful come November, sworn in January 27.
Oh, let me just back up and say one more thing. We also were told that Scientific Games doesn't dare complain about this because if they do, they could get. Yep. We've heard story after story. What happened to Shannon O'Brien in the Cannabis Commission? Deb Goldberg has done to other people. It's just Shannon O'Brien was the only one with the resources to fight back. Others can't fight back, so they've just slunk away. But she's hurt a lot of people.
Okay. Continuing my thought. So if you're elected, you take office in January, what would success look like at the end of your first term as state treasurer? What would you deem as being a success or a series of successes?
A series of successes. First of all, that we have significantly boosted local aid. I would love to see us get from 39th out of 50 to at least 30 or even 25th out of 50. I'd like us to see us solidly in the middle of the pack. I'd like to actually be in the first, the top 10% for local aid. That's not realistic, but at least get us out of, this falling position. So if we could generate both through the lottery and I can't control what the legislature allocates, but I can certainly advocate. So I would be a voice on Beacon Hill for the legislature to appropriate monies even beyond the lottery funds for local aid. My heart is in local government. I loved my time in local government. I want people to have cities, towns, or public safety, schools. These are things that I want for my community and every community. So that really would be my primary metric, is what were we able to do with local aid. But also a couple of other areas that I was able to work collaboratively with the legislature to reform the Mass School Building Authority, to both have more efficient allocation of resources, to have more equitable distribution of resources, potentially even to have greater funding. I mean, I've heard horror stories about various schools and how they're failing. Some in Boston, some in Peabody, some in other areas of the state, especially rural areas. So could we get more money to make sure that children have acceptable educational infrastructure? Also, we really need to look, within local aid, we need to look at how lottery funds are allocated. One of the stories that came to me out of New Bedford is that they are the largest contributor to the lottery in the state, but they do not receive the most funds coming back. We really need to take a deep, hard look.
Is that a formula?
Yeah, I believe it's a formula that hasn't been revisited since the 1990s. So it's woefully out of date, needs to be revisited. There's some areas that I need to look into. I don't know that there's wiggle room, but at least ask the question on our bond rating is slipping a little bit. And as a state, every time it's still strong, but not where it was. Every time the bond rating slips, our interest rate goes up. More money out of the taxpayers' pockets. So what do we need to do to get our bond rating back into a position where we're paying the lowest interest rate on borrowed funds? What can we do with Prim and Pritt and the $33 billion hole that we have in our pension funds? Prim and Pritt are actually quite well run. And again, that's a legacy of Joe Malone's reforms. We went from the worst performing pension fund to the best during his 8 years as state treasurer. And we're still one of the top performing pension funds. There's a very talented group in there. Unfortunately right now, so I view it as my job to protect them. Unfortunately right now, people are viewing that as a spot that they can raid for political goals. So the governor has already announced that she'd like to take $50 or $100 million out to invest in local businesses. I can tell you, as a longtime observer of the biotechnology industry, my husband's a 37-year executive and scientist, government is bad at picking winners and losers. I mean, it'll pick political winners, but it doesn't pick economic winners. So it will create winners simply by the money that it doles out. But I can guarantee that a state-run fund outside the purview of Prim and Pritt is not going to have the same returns that Prim and Pritt will. So for the governor to pursue her political ends, she's going to damage returns on the pension fund. What businesses want? They don't want corporate welfare. They want an environment with reasonable regulation, not over-regulation, reasonable taxes, not over-taxes, and affordability so that people will come here. I was speaking to a member of Google Ventures. The biotechnology industry in Massachusetts is in serious trouble right now. Hiring is way down, massive layoffs. We are tanking an investment. We are losing ground to North Carolina. We're losing ground to Texas.
Affordability.
It's affordability. Yeah, it's absolutely affordability. So I went a little astray, but part of what success would look like to me after the end of 4 years is to have effectively insulated Prim and Pritt from political raids on the PE Bank.
Okay. As we get ready to wrap things up, is there something that we haven't touched upon, or is there something you need to reiterate? And also, if folks are tuned in and want to learn more about you, can you fill us in?
Would love to give a summation. The most important thing that voters need to know is that the Treasurer's Office matters. It is a very powerful statewide constitutional office, and who sits in that office has a direct impact on affordability and how well run multiple departments that affect your lives on a daily basis work. I'm Elizabeth Dionne. You can learn more about my candidacy to be a taxpayer's treasurer at my website, votedionne.com. That's votedionne.com. We need all hands on deck. And this is a movement that is bipartisan for taxpayers treasurer. We are so excited for the election in November. We're really excited to take office in January and start returning the taxpayer's office to you, the treasurer, the taxpayers. Thank you.
We want to thank you for joining us here today and being our guest, and hopefully we can have you back in once you're successful come November.
Would love to be back. Thank you so much, Kevin.
You got it.
Really appreciate it.
And we want to thank you for tuning into a program like Community Chat. Again, the idea is to help you better understand some of the things that are going on in and around the community we serve, Abington, and also make you better informed when it comes to making political decisions come September and November of this year. Until our next conversation, have yourself a great day.